The planet Kepler 442b looked like a golden dream floating in space. For 300 years, the Zelani people had lived there in peace. Their blue skin shone softly in the light of two suns. They built their cities to float above huge wheat fields. Clear bridges connected the floating cities, sparkling like diamonds in the sunlight. The Zelani loved to grow food and make art. They had no armies. They had no weapons. War was something they read about in old history books, not something they ever thought would happen to them. Their children played in gardens while their parents painted beautiful pictures and wrote poems about the sunset. On this peaceful morning, everything changed. Commander Jake Morrison sat at his desk on the Earth ship called Vengeance. He was reading boring reports about patrol routes when the emergency alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed all over the ship. Every human on the ship knew that sound meant trouble. Lieutenant Amy Brooks ran to her communication station. Her fingers moved fast over the buttons and screens. Strange noises came from the speakers. Then a voice spoke in broken Galactic Standard, the language most species used to talk to each other. "Please, anyone who can hear this. We need help," the voice said. It sounded scared and desperate. They came from nowhere, like insects, like locusts. "Our cities are burning. Our people are dying. Please, if anyone in the galaxy has mercy, help us. Our children." "Oh gods, our children." The message cut off into static noise. Amy looked at Jake with wide eyes. "Sir, this is coming from the Kepler system, the peaceful farming world. The Zelani." Jake knew about the Zelani. Everyone in the Earth Defense Fleet did. They were the nice guys of the galaxy. They grew food and sold it cheap to other worlds. They made beautiful art. They never hurt anyone. If someone was attacking them, it had to be bad. Captain Ryan Davis walked onto the bridge. He was a big man with gray hair and scars on his face from old battles. "What do we have, Morrison?" Jake played the message again. Davis listened with a stone face. When it ended, he was quiet for a long moment. "Sir?" Jake asked. "Send a message to Fleet Command," Davis said. "Tell them the Zelani are under attack. Request permission to respond." "What if they say no?" Amy asked. Davis smiled, but it was not a nice smile. It was the kind of smile that made enemies run away. "They won't say no. The Zelani feed half the outer colonies. More important, they're good people. We don't let good people die on our watch." 30 minutes later, the answer came back from Earth. 3 ships would respond to the distress call: the heavy cruiser Vengeance, the assault carrier Retribution, and the stealth destroyer Nemesis. Together, they carried 5,000 of Earth's finest soldiers and the deadliest weapons humanity had ever built. Jake walked down to the marine deck to brief the soldiers. The room was full of men and women in green uniforms. They were cleaning weapons, checking armor, and talking quietly among themselves. When Jake walked in, they all stood up and paid attention. Sergeant Lisa Kane stood in the front row. She was 35 years old and had fought in 7 different wars. Her left arm was artificial, lost in the Battle of Proxima. Her face had 3 scars, each one from a different enemy. She was one of the best soldiers in the fleet. Corporal Danny Wright sat in the back. He was only 22, but he had already been in 3 major battles. His hands shook sometimes from what doctors called battle stress. But when the fighting started, those shaking hands could put a bullet through a target from a mile away. "Listen up," Jake said. The room went completely quiet. "We've got a situation on Kepler 442b. The Zelani are under attack. Enemy unknown, but early reports suggest it's the Korthak swarm." Several soldiers swore quietly. Everyone knew about the Korthak. They were big insect-like aliens that traveled in huge groups. They would land on a planet, steal everything valuable, and take the people as slaves. They had destroyed 47 worlds in the last 50 years. "The Korthak are tough," Jake continued. "They're bigger than humans, stronger than humans, and they have natural armor. They work together like a hive mind. They've never lost a battle against any other species." Lisa raised her hand. "Sir, what makes us think we can beat them if nobody else can?" Jake's smile was just as cold as Captain Davis's had been. "Because we're not like anybody else, Sergeant. We've been fighting wars since we learned to pick up sticks. We've killed everything on our planet that tried to eat us, and then we killed each other for 10,000 years. We got so good at war that we had to leave Earth just to find new things to fight." The soldiers laughed. It was not happy laughter. It was the laughter of predators who had just been told where to find their next meal. "The Korthak think they're the scariest things in space," Jake said. "They're about to learn they're wrong. We are." Private Tony Morgan raised his hand. He was carrying a plasma cannon that weighed as much as a small car. "What's the mission, sir?" "Simple," Jake said. "Land on the planet. Find the Zelani survivors. Kill everything with more than 4 legs." Questions? There were no questions. There never were when the mission was this clear. 2 hours later, the 3 Earth ships jumped into hyperspace. The journey to Kepler 442b would take 18 hours. During that time, the soldiers prepared their weapons, studied maps of the planet, and planned their attack. Dr. Helen Price, the ship's doctor and scientist, studied everything the computer knew about Korthak biology. She found their weak spots, learned how their armor worked, and figured out the best ways to hurt them. She sent this information to every soldier on the 3 ships. In the weapon rooms, technicians loaded special ammunition. These bullets were made to punch through Korthak armor and explode inside their bodies. The plasma cannons were charged with enough energy to melt through steel. The grenades were filled with chemicals that would burn alien flesh. On the bridge, Captain Davis looked at the star charts. 18 hours, he said to Jake. "Think the Zelani can hold out that long?" Jake shrugged. "If they can't, we'll avenge them. Either way, the Korthak are going to regret the day they decided to attack a species under Earth's protection." "The Zelani aren't under our protection," Davis pointed out. Officially, Jake smiled. "They are now." In the darkness of space, 3 human ships raced toward a battle that would change the galaxy forever. The Zelani had sent out a cry for help, asking any civilized species to save them from the monsters that were destroying their world. They were about to learn that sometimes, the best way to fight monsters is to send bigger monsters, and humanity had spent 10,000 years becoming the biggest monsters of all. The Earth Defense Fleet was coming, and they brought with them every lesson learned from countless wars. They brought plasma fire and steel death. They brought tactics written in blood and strategies born from desperation. Most importantly, they brought the one thing that had kept humanity alive through every disaster, every war, every attempt at extinction, the absolute refusal to let the bad guys win. The Korthak had made one very big mistake. They had attacked someone under humanity's protection. In 18 hours, they would begin to understand why that was the last mistake many species ever made. Space was big and dark and full of dangerous things. But the most dangerous things in space were 3 ships full of angry humans racing toward a fight they intended to win. 18 hours later, the 3 Earth ships dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler 442b. What they saw made even the hardest soldiers curse. The beautiful planet that had once looked like a golden dream now looked like a nightmare. Black smoke covered half the world. The floating cities that had sparkled in the sunlight were now burning wrecks falling from the sky. The clear bridges between them had been shattered into millions of pieces. Around the planet, hundreds of alien ships moved like angry wasps. The Korthak vessels were ugly things made of dark metal and sharp edges. They looked like giant insects with wings made of steel and weapons where their stingers should be. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Vengeance and watched the destruction through the main screen. "How many ships?" he asked. Lieutenant Amy Brooks worked at her station counting the enemy. 347 confirmed, sir. Maybe more hiding behind the planet." Captain Ryan Davis walked up beside Jake. His face was hard as stone. "Any word from the surface?" Amy shook her head. "Nothing, sir. All the Zelani communication stations are either destroyed or jammed. We're flying blind down there." Davis nodded slowly. He had seen this before. When the Korthak attacked a world, they always cut off communications first. It made the people feel alone and hopeless. It also made rescue much harder. "Signal the other ships," Davis ordered. "Begin Operation Thunderstorm." On the assault carrier Retribution, Colonel Frank Hayes gathered his Marines in the launch bay. 2,000 soldiers in green armor stood ready to fight. Their faces were painted with black stripes. Their weapons were loaded and ready. They looked like death itself preparing to go to work. "Listen up, Marines," Hayes shouted. His voice echoed off the metal walls. "The bugs think they own this planet now. We're going to teach them they're wrong. We're going in fast and hard. No mercy, no prisoners, no retreat," the Marines cheered. It was a sound like thunder mixed with the howl of hunting wolves. Major Beth Carter led the first wave of attack pods. She was 30 years old and had been fighting aliens since she was 18. Her armor was covered with small marks, each one representing an enemy she had killed. There were over 200 marks. The attack pods were small ships designed to carry soldiers from spaceships down to planets. They were fast, tough, and very hard to shoot down. Each pod held 12 Marines with enough weapons to destroy a small city. "Remember the plan?" Carter said into her radio as the pods launched. "Hit the ground running. Find the survivors. Kill everything else. Make the bugs regret the day they learned to fly." The pods screamed down through the atmosphere like falling meteors. Korthak fighter ships tried to intercept them, but the pods were too fast and too well armed. Several alien ships exploded in bright flashes of light. Private Tony Morgan sat in his pod holding his plasma cannon. The weapon was almost as big as he was and could melt through 3 feet of steel. He had used it to destroy alien tanks, alien bunkers, and once an entire alien city. Today he planned to use it on Korthak warriors. 30 seconds to landing, the pilot announced. Tony checked his weapon one more time. Next to him, Sergeant Lisa Kane loaded special explosive bullets into her rifle. Each bullet was designed to punch through alien armor and explode inside the target. She had killed over 50 different species with these bullets. The pods hit the ground like bombs going off. The doors burst open and the Marines poured out shooting. The first thing they saw was a group of 20 Korthak warriors standing around a burning building. The Korthak were even uglier in person than in pictures. They stood 8 feet tall on 6 legs. Their bodies were covered in natural armor that looked like black metal. Their heads had 4 eyes and mandibles that could bite through steel. Each warrior carried weapons that shot acid and poison. But ugly and tough as they were, the Korthak were not ready for angry humans. Tony Morgan fired his plasma cannon. The beam of superheated gas hit the lead Korthak and turned it into glowing vapor. The explosion knocked 3 other aliens to the ground. Lisa Kane's rifle barked 6 times in 2 seconds. 6 Korthak dropped with holes blown through their armor. The explosive bullets did their work inside the alien bodies, making sure the enemy stayed dead. The rest of the Marines opened fire. Rifles cracked, machine guns roared, and grenades exploded. In 15 seconds, 20 Korthak warriors became 20 piles of smoking alien parts. "Area secure," Carter reported, moving to Objective Alpha. Objective Alpha was a Zelani shelter that intelligence thought might still have survivors. The Marines moved through the ruined city like hunters stalking prey. Every shadow might hide an enemy. Every sound might mean danger. They found the shelter entrance behind a collapsed building. The heavy door was locked from the inside. Carter knocked on it using the special code that Earth intelligence had worked out with the Zelani government years ago. Slowly, carefully, the door opened. A blue face looked out, then quickly disappeared. There were voices speaking in the musical Zelani language, full of fear and hope. The door opened wider. An old Zelani male stepped out. His clothes were torn and dirty. His blue skin was pale with shock. Behind him, Carter could see dozens of other Zelani hiding in the underground shelter. "You came," the old alien said in broken English. "The message. We sent message asking for help, but we heard only monsters answered the call." Staff Sergeant Paula Thompson pulled off her helmet. Her face was covered with scars from fighting in 12 different wars. Her eyes were hard and cold, the eyes of someone who had seen too much death. When she smiled, it was not a friendly smile. "We are monsters," she told the Zelani. "But we're your monsters now." The old Zelani stared at her. "I am Elder Zephi. I speak for my people. Are you? Are you here to save us?" Paula looked around at the burning city, then back at the alien. "We're here to kill bugs. If that saves you, great. If not, at least we'll make them pay for what they did." More Marines were arriving. They spread out through the ruins, looking for more survivors and more enemies. The sounds of fighting could be heard from all directions as human soldiers met Korthak warriors in battle. Private Danny Wright found a group of Zelani children hiding in a destroyed school. The little aliens were crying and calling for their parents. Danny was only 22, but he had learned to be gentle with civilians even when everything around him was violence and death. "It's okay," he told them in simple Galactic standard. "The Earth people are here now. We'll keep you safe." One of the children, a little girl with big purple eyes, looked up at him. "Are you the monsters from the scary planet?" Danny thought about that question. Earth was known throughout the galaxy as the world where everything tried to kill everything else. Other species told stories about Earth to frighten their children. Humans were the monsters in alien nightmares. "Yeah, kid," Danny said softly. "We're the monsters, but we're the good monsters." As the first day of fighting ended, the humans had secured 3 refugee camps and killed over 500 Korthak warriors. But the aliens had thousands more soldiers on the planet, and millions more coming from space. Elder Zephi sat with Major Carter in the ruins of what had once been a beautiful art gallery. Alien sculptures lay broken on the floor. Paintings were burned and torn. "Your people fight very well," Zephi said, "but there are so many of them. How can you hope to win?" Carter cleaned her rifle while she talked. The weapon had killed 37 Korthak that day. She planned to kill many more tomorrow. "You want to know our secret?" she asked. "We've been fighting each other for 10,000 years. We got so good at war that we ran out of things to fight on our own planet. So we came to space looking for new enemies." She pointed to the stars visible through a hole in the ceiling. "Every species out there learned to fight because they had to defend themselves from predators or invaders. We learned to fight because we enjoyed it. We made war into an art form." Zephi shuddered. "That sounds terrible," Carter smiled. "It is terrible. But right now it's also the only thing standing between you and extinction. The Korthak have conquered 47 worlds. They've never met humans before. They're about to learn why that's the biggest mistake they ever made." In the darkness above, more human ships were arriving. Reinforcements from Earth, carrying fresh soldiers and deadlier weapons. The Korthak had started a war they thought they could win easily. They were wrong. They had picked a fight with the one species in the galaxy that was better at war than they were, and humanity was just getting started. General Karen Wells stood in the war room of the Vengeance looking at a huge map of the planet. Red dots showed where the Korthak had built their bases. Blue dots showed where human forces were fighting. Yellow dots marked the locations of Zelani survivors. The map looked like a disease spreading across a healthy body. The red dots outnumbered the blue ones by 10 to 1. "Status report," Wells ordered. Colonel Frank Hayes stepped forward. He had been fighting on the planet for 3 days now. His armor was dented and scorched from laser burns. "We've secured 12 refugee sites with approximately 8,000 Zelani survivors. Enemy casualties are running about 15 to 1 in our favor. Our losses?" Wells asked. 43 dead, 112 wounded. "Most of the wounded will be back in action within a week." Wells nodded. Those were good numbers against an enemy like the Korthak, but there were still hundreds of thousands of aliens on the planet, and more arriving every hour. "What about their command structure?" she asked. Captain Steve Nelson, who led the engineering teams, pulled up another map. This one showed the underground tunnels the Korthak had dug all over the planet. "They're using a hive mind system, General. All orders come from central command posts. If we can cut their communications, their troops become confused and easy to kill." Wells smiled. It was the kind of smile that made smart people run away and dumb people attack. "Show me these command posts." Nelson pointed to 7 locations on the map. Each was heavily defended by thousands of Korthak warriors. "The problem is getting close enough to destroy them. They've got overlapping fields of fire and natural armor that can stop most of our weapons." "Most of our weapons," Wells repeated. "What about the special ones?" Hayes grinned. "The bugs have never seen thermite charges or neurotoxin gas. They build their defenses to stop plasma and lasers, not chemical weapons." Wells turned to the communication officer. "Send a message to all ground commanders. Operation Anthill begins in 6 hours. We're going to teach these bugs why humans invented chemical warfare." On the planet's surface, Major Beth Carter led her team through the ruins of a Zelani city toward their target. Intelligence had identified a major Korthak processing center where captured civilians were being sorted. Adults went to slave pens. Children went to something much worse. Dr. Helen Price had found evidence that the Korthak were using Zelani children as test subjects for biological weapons. They were trying to create diseases that would kill specific species while leaving the Korthak immune. It was the kind of evil that made even hardened soldiers sick to their stomachs. 200 meters to the target," Carter whispered into her radio. "I can see guard towers and patrol routes. Recommend we use the sewers for approach." The sewers under the Zelani cities had been built for maintenance, not warfare. But humans had been fighting in tunnels since the first caveman hid from a bigger caveman. The Marines moved through the dark passages like deadly shadows. Sergeant Lisa Kane led the advance team. She had fought in tunnels on 6 different worlds. Her rifle was equipped with infrared sights that could see through smoke and darkness. Her armor was painted with special chemicals that masked her heat signature from alien sensors. Behind her, Private Tony Morgan carried his plasma cannon and a backpack full of thermite charges. Thermite was an old human invention that burned hot enough to melt steel. The Korthak had never encountered it. because most species considered chemical weapons too cruel to use. Humans had no such qualms. When survival was at stake, cruelty became a virtue. The team reached a grate that led into the processing center's basement. Through the metal bars, they could hear the sounds of alien machinery and the cries of Zelani prisoners. Lisa used a small laser to cut through the grate without making noise. The basement was full of cages. In each cage were Zelani civilians, their blue skin pale with fear and sickness. Some were adults, their artistic hands now chained and useless. Others were children, crying for parents they would never see again. But what made the humans truly angry were the empty cages. The ones that had been filled yesterday but were empty today. The ones that would never be filled again. "Execute the plan," Carter ordered. The Marines moved like death itself. Lisa's rifle spoke 6 times, and 6 Korthak guards fell before they could raise an alarm. Tony placed thermite charges on the alien machinery, setting timers for 5 minutes. Other Marines began opening cages and helping prisoners to their feet. A young Zelani girl, maybe 10 years old by human standards, grabbed Carter's armored hand. "The monsters," she whispered. "They took my brother to the laboratory. They hurt him." Carter knelt down to the child's level. Her scarred face was gentle, the way it never was when looking at enemies. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lyrenda." "Well, Lyrenda, my name is Beth, and I promise you something. Every monster in this place is going to pay for what they did to your brother. Okay?" The little girl nodded, then asked the question that made Carter's blood run cold. "Are you monsters too?" Carter thought about all the people she had killed, all the worlds she had helped destroy, all the terrible things she had done in the name of protecting humanity. "Yeah, kid. We're monsters. But we're your monsters now." The thermite charges exploded with the heat of a small sun. Alien machinery melted like ice cream on a hot day. The processing center's main computer burned out in showers of sparks. And in 7 other locations across the planet, similar explosions destroyed similar facilities. The effect was immediate. Korthak patrols that had been moving with military precision suddenly began wandering aimlessly. Communication between units broke down. Orders went undelivered. The hive mind that had conquered 47 worlds was suddenly blind and deaf. Commander Jake Morrison led a strike team against a Korthak ammunition depot. Without central coordination, the guards were easy to outflank and destroy. The depot contained enough explosives to level a mountain. Morrison made sure it all went off at once. The explosion could be seen from orbit. It sent a mushroom cloud 3 miles into the sky and left a crater where the depot used to be. More importantly, it destroyed ammunition supplies that would have kept the Korthak fighting for months. Dr. Helen Price worked with the rescued prisoners, treating their injuries and documenting the crimes committed against them. What she found in the alien laboratories made her sick. The Korthak weren't just trying to create biological weapons, they were trying to perfect them. "General," she reported to Wells via encrypted communication, "I found evidence that Earth is their next target. They have genetic samples from our colony worlds. They're trying to create a plague that will kill humans but leave other species unharmed." Wells received the report in silence. When Price finished talking, the general was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was colder than space itself. "Doctor, in your professional opinion, how long before they perfect this weapon? Based on their research notes, maybe 6 months. Maybe less? Then we don't have 6 months to finish this war. Signal all commanders. Operation Cleanup begins now. No prisoners, no mercy, no survivors. The Korthak wanted to commit genocide. Let's show them what genocide looks like when humans do it." The word went out to every human soldier on the planet. The rules of engagement had changed. This was no longer a rescue mission. It was an extermination. Sergeant Lisa Kane received the new orders while clearing a Korthak bunker. She looked at the alien corpses around her, then at her remaining ammunition. She was going to need more bullets. Private Danny Wright got the message while helping Zelani survivors reach a safe zone. One of the refugees, an old artist named Veltar, noticed the change in the young soldier's expression. "What is it?" Veltar asked. "Bad news?" Danny checked his rifle and counted his grenades. "Not for us," he said. But the bugs just signed their own death warrant. They made this personal. Across the planet, the war changed from a battle to save civilians into something much simpler and much more terrible. The Korthak had threatened to destroy humanity's future. Now they were going to learn why that was the last mistake their species would ever make. The humans weren't just fighting to win anymore. They were fighting to make sure their enemies never got the chance to threaten anyone ever again. And when humans fought for survival, they didn't just win, they eliminated the problem permanently. Admiral Rick Stone stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, staring at the tactical display with growing concern. The long-range scanners had detected something that made his blood run cold. 50 new ships were approaching the system. Big ships. Ships that could crack a planet in half. How long until they arrive? He asked Lieutenant Amy Brooks. 18 hours, sir. Maybe less if they push their engines hard. Stone did the math in his head. 3 human ships against 50 Korthak hive ships. Those were not good odds, even for humans. But worse than the numbers was what those ships meant. This wasn't just a raid anymore. It was a full invasion fleet, sent to harvest an entire world and everyone on it. Signal General Wells on the surface, Stone ordered. Tell her we have bigger problems coming. On the planet below, General Karen Wells received the message while coordinating attacks on the remaining Korthak strongholds. She read it twice, then called for an emergency meeting with all senior officers. Lieutenant Colonel Mary Kim was the first to arrive. She was a small woman with quick eyes and a mind that worked like a computer. She specialized in training other armies, teaching them how to fight like humans. She had turned 3 peaceful species into effective warriors in the past 10 years. We're outnumbered 50-3, Wells said without any introduction. We have 18 hours before the main Korthak fleet arrives. At that point, this planet becomes uninhabitable and Earth becomes the next target. The officers around the table absorbed this news in silence. They had all fought impossible battles before, but this was different. This was hopeless. What are our options? Asked Colonel Frank Hayes. Wells looked at the tactical map spread across the table. Red dots still outnumbered blue dots even after 4 days of constant fighting. We have 2 choices. We can evacuate what civilians we can and retreat, or we can stay and fight a battle we cannot win. There's a third option, Mary Kim said quietly. All eyes turned to her. Kim pointed to the yellow dots on the map, the ones that marked Zelani survivor camps. We turn them into soldiers. We teach the Zelani to fight. The room went silent. The idea was so simple and so terrible that nobody spoke for a full minute. They're farmers and artists, Hayes said finally. They've never held a weapon in their lives. You can't turn people like that into warriors in 18 hours. Kim's smile was cold as winter. You can if you teach them to fight like humans. Strip away all the fancy tactics, all the complex strategies. Just teach them the basics, how to kill efficiently and how to stay alive while doing it. Wells considered the proposal. It was desperate, probably doomed to fail and would require turning innocent civilians into killers. It was also their only chance of survival. Do it, she ordered. The crash course in human warfare began immediately. Every available soldier became an instructor. Every Zelani who could hold a weapon became a student. The classroom was the ruins of their own world. Sergeant Lisa Kane found herself teaching a group of Zelani farmers how to make bombs from their own agricultural chemicals. The ingredients for explosives were all around them, in the fertilizers and pesticides they had used to grow food. This is ammonium nitrate, she explained, holding up a bag of white powder. Mix it with diesel fuel and you get an explosive that can blow up a building. Add some metal fragments and you get a bomb that can kill dozens of enemies at once. An old Zelani farmer named Dorvek raised his hand. But this chemical is for growing food, for making life, not taking it. Lisa's expression was hard. Everything can be a weapon if you know how to use it. Your farming tools can become spears. Your chemicals can become bombs. Your knowledge of the land can become tactical advantage. The only question is whether you want to live as farmers or die as victims. Private Danny Wright taught a group of young Zelani how to turn their art supplies into weapons. Paint became camouflage. Sculpting tools became knives. Canvas became material for making improvised armor. The Korthak see with infrared vision, Danny explained to a teenage Zelani named Kextal. This paint contains minerals that block heat signatures. Cover yourself with it, and they can't see you in the dark. Kextal had been a student at the Zelani Art Academy before the invasion. His hands, which once created beautiful sculptures, now learned to create deadly traps. Will this really work? He asked. Danny showed him a knife made from a sharpened piece of metal and wrapped with cloth. I killed 6 Korthak yesterday with a weapon just like this. Art is about creation, but war is about problem solving. You're just solving a different kind of problem now. The hardest part was teaching the Zelani to think like predators instead of prey. Elder Sci-Fi struggled with this more than anyone. He had lived his entire life believing that violence was wrong, that problems should be solved with words and understanding. Commander Jake Morrison found the old alien sitting alone in the ruins of a temple, staring at a rifle he couldn't bring himself to pick up. "I cannot do this," Sci-Fi said. "We are not killers. We create life, we do not destroy it." Morrison sat down beside him. "I understand. Before humans went to space, we had people like you. Peaceful folks who just wanted to grow food and make art and live quiet lives. You know what happened to them?" Sci-Fi shook his head. "They died," Morrison said simply. "They died because other humans weren't peaceful. They died because when good people refuse to fight, bad people win, and then nobody gets to be peaceful anymore." The elder picked up the rifle with shaking hands. "But what will we become if we do this? What will we turn into?" Morrison's answer was honest and brutal. "Alive, you'll become alive. Everything else is just details." Dr. Helen Price made another disturbing discovery while analyzing captured Korthak technology. The aliens weren't just harvesting genetic material from the species they conquered. They were using it to improve themselves, adding the best traits of each species to their own biology. "They're evolutionary parasites," she reported to General Wells. "They take the strength of one species, the intelligence of another, the speed of a third. Each generation becomes more dangerous than the last." Wells absorbed this information grimly. "How long have they been doing this?" "Based on their genetic structure, maybe 1,000 years. They've incorporated traits from hundreds of different species. No wonder they've been so successful." This news spread among the human forces like wildfire. The Korthak weren't just conquerors. They were thieves, stealing the very essence of what made each species unique. And if they succeeded here, they would add human traits to their collection. The thought of Korthak warriors with human intelligence and human ruthlessness was enough to give even the bravest soldiers nightmares. Young Lear Enda, the Zelani girl who had been rescued from the processing center, approached Major Beth Carter during a brief lull in the fighting. The child had been watching the humans train her people, her large purple eyes taking in every lesson. "Why do you fight so well?" she asked. "Why are humans so good at war?" Carter looked at the little girl, trying to find words that would explain 10,000 years of human history. "We come from a world where everything tried to kill us," she said finally. "The animals, the weather, the diseases, and most of all, each other. We had to learn to fight or we would have died out long ago." "Were you born to be soldiers?" Lyrenda asked. Carter shook her head. "I wanted to be a teacher when I was your age. I wanted to help children learn about art and music. But sometimes the world doesn't let you be what you want to be. Sometimes you have to be what the world needs." Lyrenda was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up a small piece of sharpened metal that the humans had been using to teach knife fighting. "Will you teach me to fight?" Carter looked at the weapon in the child's hands, then at the determination in her eyes. The little girl who had once created beautiful drawings was asking to learn how to kill. It was heartbreaking and necessary and completely unfair. "Yeah, kid," Carter said softly. "I'll teach you to fight." As the 18-hour deadline approached, something remarkable happened. The Zelani were learning, not just the techniques of warfare, but the mindset. They were beginning to think like hunters instead of prey. Their movements became more careful, more purposeful. Their eyes became harder. They were becoming human in all the ways that mattered for survival. And in orbit above them, 50 Korthak hive ships prepared to deliver what they thought would be the final blow to a defeated world. They had no idea that the peaceful farmers they came to harvest had spent the last day learning from the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. The Korthak were about to discover what happened when humans decided to share their knowledge of war. The 50 Korthak hive ships dropped out of hyperspace like dark angels of death. Each ship was the size of a small city, bristling with weapons that could turn mountains into glass. They had come to finish what their advanced forces had started, to harvest every living thing on Kepler 400. What they found instead was a world ready for war. Admiral Rick Stone watched from the bridge of the Vengeance as the massive alien fleet took formation around the planet. His 3 ships looked like insects compared to the Korthak monsters. But Stone had learned long ago that size wasn't everything in a fight. "All ships, execute Plan Mosquito," he ordered. The 3 human ships split up and began moving in unpredictable patterns around the alien fleet. They struck fast at isolated targets, fired everything they had, then disappeared before the Korthak could respond. It was like watching mosquitoes attack a herd of elephants, except these mosquitoes had nuclear stingers. The EDF Nemesis, the stealth destroyer, appeared behind a Korthak ship and fired 6 nuclear torpedoes at point-blank range. The alien vessel exploded like a small star, its debris raining down on 3 other ships. Before the Korthak could turn their weapons on the Nemesis, it had vanished back into the darkness of space. On the planet's surface, General Karen Wells coordinated the defense from a bunker that had once been a Zelani art museum. The walls were covered with beautiful paintings that somehow made the war maps and weapon displays look even more terrible by comparison. Status. Report, she ordered. Colonel, Frank Hayes pointed to the tactical display. The Korthak are landing troops at 17 different sites. Approximately 200,000 warriors plus support equipment. But they're having trouble with coordination. Wells smiled grimly. The human attacks in space were more than just harassment. They were disrupting the Korthak command network, making it hard for the aliens to organize their ground assault. What about our new recruits? She asked. Lieutenant Colonel Mary Kim stepped forward. Her face showed pride mixed with sadness. The Zelani have exceeded all expectations, General. They're not just following orders anymore. They're thinking tactically, adapting to battlefield conditions. In 18 hours, we turned farmers into fighters. But the cost of that transformation was visible everywhere. The gentle, artistic Zelani who had survived the initial invasion were gone, replaced by grim-faced soldiers who moved with deadly purpose. They had learned humanity's greatest lesson. Sometimes survival required becoming something terrible. Young Lyrenda crouched in the ruins of her old school, holding a rifle that was almost as big as she was. The 10-year-old girl who had once painted pictures of flowers now painted her face with mud and blood for camouflage. Her purple eyes, once filled with wonder, now held the cold calculation of a predator. She had learned well from her human teachers. A group of Korthak warriors rounded the corner, their black armor gleaming in the smoky light. They expected to find cowering civilians. Instead, they found improvised explosives hidden in the rubble. Lyrenda triggered the bombs with a remote control that Major Beth Carter had taught her to make. The explosion turned 6 alien warriors into scattered pieces. The little girl didn't flinch at the sight. She just picked up her rifle and moved to her next position, following the tactical plan that humans had drilled into her head. Elder Zephi led a group of former farmers in an attack on a Korthak supply depot. The old alien moved through the battlefield with surprising skill, using cover and concealment techniques that Sergeant Lisa Kane had taught him. His hands, which had once created beautiful pottery, now carried grenades that could level buildings. Remember, he whispered to his team as they approached the target, we are no longer the people we were yesterday. Today we are what our world needs us to be. The Zelani fighters moved like ghosts through the ruins. They used their knowledge of the local terrain to set up perfect ambushes. They used their farming chemicals to create deadly traps. They used their artistic skills to build camouflaged weapons that looked like innocent debris. But most importantly, they used the human lessons of ruthless efficiency. Every shot had to count. Every move had to have a purpose. Every enemy had to die. Commander Jake Morrison led a mixed team of humans and Zelani in an assault on the largest Korthak landing site. The aliens had established a fortified base around their ships, complete with defensive walls and automated weapons. This is going to be ugly, Morrison told his team. The bugs have had time to dig in. We're going to have to take this the hard way. Kextal, the young Zelani artist turned soldier, checked his improvised explosives. Define hard way. Morrison's grin was sharp as a knife. We're going to walk up to their front door and knock it down. The attack began with a barrage of human artillery and Zelani chemical bombs. The defensive walls cracked and crumbled under the assault. Then the ground forces charged, screaming battle cries in 2 different languages. Morrison led from the front, his rifle barking constantly as he advanced. Behind him, Kextal moved with fluid grace, using artistic timing to place his bombs with devastating precision. The young Zelani had learned that destruction could be as beautiful as creation, if done with enough skill. The battle for the landing site lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 2,000 Korthak warriors were dead. Their ships were burning wrecks and the survivors were fleeing into the wilderness. The cost had been high. 30 humans and 80 Zelani had died, but the objective was achieved. In space, the naval battle continued with desperate intensity. The 3 human ships had destroyed 12 Korthak vessels, but they were taking heavy damage in return. The Vengeance was down to half power, the Retribution had lost her main engines, and the Nemesis was leaking atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. Admiral Stone knew they couldn't keep this up much longer. But they didn't have to. The real target wasn't the Korthak fleet. It was the command ship at the center of the formation. All ships converge on the Hive Queen vessel, Stone ordered. Everything we have left, right down their throat. The 3 damaged human ships limped toward the massive Korthak command vessel. It was 10 times their size and carried enough firepower to destroy a moon. But size meant nothing if you couldn't hit your target. The human ships came in from 3 different directions, using the wreckage of destroyed vessels as cover. When they were close enough to see the alien hull plating, they opened fire with everything they had left: nuclear missiles, plasma cannons, kinetic projectiles, and experimental weapons that barely had names. The combined firepower of 3 human warships concentrated on a single target created a light show that could be seen from the planet's surface. The Korthak command ship's shields flared and died, its armor cracked and melted, its internal systems overloaded and exploded, and at the center of it all, in the heavily protected command chamber, the Korthak Queen felt fear for the first time in her 1,000-year life. The Queen was a massive creature, part insect and part living computer. She controlled the entire swarm through bioacoustic signals that coordinated millions of warriors across dozens of worlds. She was the brain of a galactic plague, and she was dying. In her final moments, she tried to send a surrender signal to the human ships. She offered to withdraw from Zelani space, to leave Earth alone, to find other targets for her swarms. The answer came from General Wells, broadcast on all frequencies so that every surviving Korthak could hear it. Negative. No quarter given. No survivors. You threatened our friends and you threatened our home. That was a mistake you don't get to make twice. The command ship exploded in a flash of light that briefly outshone the system's 2 suns. The bioacoustic network that had controlled the Korthak forces collapsed instantly. Across the planet and throughout the fleet, alien warriors suddenly found themselves alone, confused, and leaderless. The remaining Korthak ships fled the system in panic. Those on the ground were hunted down by combined human Zelani teams who showed no mercy. The species that had conquered 47 worlds was broken and scattered. Their threat ended forever. In the aftermath, as the smoke cleared and the dead were counted, Elder Sci-Fi stood with Commander Morrison in what had once been the capital city's main plaza. The beautiful sculptures were gone, replaced by memorials to the fallen. The gentle fountains had been filled with rubble and ash. "We survived," Sci-Fi said quietly. "But what have we become?" Morrison looked around at the Zelani survivors. They moved with military precision now, checking weapons and securing the area. Children who should have been playing were instead learning to disarm unexploded ordnance. Artists had become soldiers, farmers had become fighters. "You became alive," Morrison answered. "Everything else is just details." The distress signal had asked for help from any civilized species. They had received something better. They had received the monsters from Earth, who taught them that sometimes civilization's greatest gift was the capacity for righteous violence. The peaceful Zelani were gone forever. But in their place stood something new, a species that had learned humanity's most important lesson. The strong survived by becoming stronger. The weak survived by becoming dangerous. And throughout the galaxy, other peaceful species would soon learn the same lesson, because word was spreading. If you wanted to survive in a hostile universe, you called Earth.